welcome everyone. And I think to start off, we obviously have to celebrate the leader of the free world, Donald J. Trump, coming to visit our humble island. So I thought we would take it in turns to talk about which of the following that I've selected are real and which one, just the one, is made up.
God.
So,
okay, cool.
Do we want to do them all at once or do them one by one and find out which one's fake?
Let's do them one by one.
Yeah. Okay, Andy.
Righto.
These are from Donald Trump's Twitter and also things he has said in speeches as well.
Right.
So number one, Ariana Huffington is unattractive both inside and out. I fully understand why her former husband left her for a man. He made a good decision.
Jesus. That's got to be fake. He can't have said that.
Do you want to hear the answer now or wait till the end?
I'll wait till the end.
Okay. David, the concept of shaking hands is absolutely terrible, and statistically I've been proven right.
He's bound to have fucking said that. Yeah, he did say that. 100%. This land is full.
Manjit.
Yeah.
Sorry, losers and haters, but my IQ is one of the highest, and you all know it. Please don't feel so stupid or insecure. It's not your fault.
I'm going to absolutely say yes. That's him. I may say yes to everything.
You see, the problem with that one is I don't think he'd have any consideration for like, please don't feel bad.
Yeah.
That's the bit that sounds fake, because he would not give a monkey's how people felt.
Yeah.
So I'm going to change my mind. I think mine's true, and the one you give to Manjit is fake, just because it showed compassion for how other people felt, and he doesn't care.
He doesn't have that ability to decenter himself.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
You could. Well, you're stealing mine.
I am. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm going to say yours is fake, and I'm going to say
so I'm
mine.
going to remember my own answer. Mine's fake. Yeah. You think mine's fake, and yours is.
Yeah,
real.
I've changed my mind about that.
You're confusing me now. I'm not sure we're going to score points,
Yeah.
but since there's only one that's wrong, it's we all win or lose, depending on how it goes. Right, Andy, you again. I've heard all about the cyber problems. Security is an issue. It's important to me. I know Melania knows a lot about it. She has a science degree and is a genius. I know that well. I don't let anyone become a Trump unless they are a certifiable genius. She has the brain of a supercomputer and will be an asset on so many issues as your First Lady, especially the cyber. The number of computers I've seen her switch on, amazing, fantastic.
He's even doing the hand movements.
Yeah.
You see, you went like that then.
Yeah.
That cannot be true. But there's been one out of all these is fake.
Yeah.
Oh no, this is going to fry my tiny little brain. Yeah, I'm still going to have to say true, because I genuinely think the one you give to Manjit about him showing compassion for how other people think, that's got to be the fake one.
Dave, my fingers are long and beautiful, as it has been well documented, of various other parts of my body.
Move on to this young man here.
Yeah. You can't draw yourself to answer.
He did actually
Exactly.
He did actually say that. I'm sure he did.
I can imagine him saying it all, because he's a fucking loon.
He is a loon.
Yeah.
But the argument that he had when somebody accused him of having tiny hands, and that was what he said in response.
Right, Manjit.
Yeah.
As a kid, I was making a building with blocks in our playroom. I didn't have enough, so I asked my younger brother Robert if I could borrow some of his. He said, okay, but you have to give them back when you're done. I used all of my blocks, then all of his blocks, and when I was done, I had a great building, which I then glued together. Robert never did get those blocks back.
Yeah, I think he was building Trump Tower then as a child. That seems a reasonable thing, and just the selfish, self-centered. Not just the attitude, but physically to just nick all the bricks. That's him.
The amazing thing is that since he was 7 years old and stole those bricks from his little brother, there's not been an ounce of emotional growth in him, has there?
No.
Yeah.
You know, he still is that selfish 7-year-old brick-stealing tit.
Final one, and this goes out to everyone, and this is... Oof. I have a great relationship with the blacks. I've always had a great relationship with the blacks.
Oh dear. Did you hear the tumbleweed as we're all too scared to answer that one?
So, which one do you think it was? Was it the Ariana Huffington, her husband leaving her for a gay man was the best idea? Was it the concept of shaking hands is absolutely terrible? Sorry, losers and haters, my IQ is great. Sorry, you have to experience that. Cyber problems, Melania is a genius. Fingers are long and beautiful, other parts also. Or I stole my brother's bricks to build Trump Tower from a young age, or the final one, which speaks for itself.
I'm going to change my mind again and think that it's because my argument that the one you gave to Manjit was fake. It's a sarcastic apology. It's not genuine, is it? Mm-hmm. You know what he's saying? Sorry, losers. Oh, which one? What do you think, Dave?
The Melania one, where she's super brain.
So you're saying that one's
the fake?
Fake.
Why do you think that?
Because he wouldn't say nice things about her. I just think it's fucking. She's just a doll on his arm, and he wouldn't say anything about her IQ or anything.
What did he say?
Do you want me to read the whole thing out again?
Yeah, that one.
I've heard all about the cyber problems. Security is an issue. It's important to me. I know Melania knows a lot about it. She has a science degree and is a genius. I know that well. I don't let anyone become a Trump unless they are a certifiable genius. She has the brain of a supercomputer and will be an asset on so many issues as your first lady, especially the cyber. The number of computers I've seen her switch on, amazing, fantastic.
See, that's got to be true. Yeah, it's got to be true, that one, I think. Because it's all ego, isn't it? I don't let anybody become a Trump.
Yeah, but does his ego go beyond the boundaries of himself? Yeah. Well, people are good.
I'll just throw this in. Do you remember what he said about his daughter? That, you know, if she wasn't my daughter, I'd be dating her. Every man in the country wants to go out with her. Yeah. It's because she is part of him, you know, his sort of genetic legacy.
And like every appointee he's ever appointed, this is the greatest man who's ever lived.
Yeah, okay.
And then 3 weeks later, he's a traitor.
He's the worst person I've ever met.
Yeah.
And he does talk about himself in the third party, you know, Sadiq Khan's upset the United States president.
Yeah.
That was him talking about himself.
Yeah.
So he's hard, you can't really...
That's always very strange.
He actually likes, you know, talking about himself as a third party as well. So it's difficult.
Yeah, I'm going to go with him saying sorry to losers and haters is the fake. That's my final answer.
Do you want to go with that, or are you still with?
I'll go with
I'll stick with the team.
I'll go with the losers and fake. That's the fake one as well.
You're all wrong.
Oh!
Do you want to know which one was the fake one?
No.
Dave, you were right. The one about Melania I made up earlier today.
Oh, brilliant. Brilliant.
Kiss
We're here with Manjit Sahota. He's the co-founder of a Nottingham-based group called Poets Against Racism. So thank you for joining us today. We really appreciate it. First, a question with an answer which may seem obvious. What is Poets Against Racism? How long has it been going and what inspired its creation?
Poets Against Racism, it's a collective of poets, rappers, spoken word artists, and to sort of perform in venues, bring poets from different backgrounds together, and to use their art to raise the issue about the rise of racism. Started in 2016, not part of a coincidence with Brexit, but partly because there was a rise of spoken word as an art form, and venues were starting to put poetry on. And at the same time, I was going to poetry venues, and I went to my first one, Nottingham, in a cave, 4 stories down in the Malt Cross in Nottingham, 30 people packed a room. Every other poet talked about Trump, Theresa May, refugees, mental health, isolation, madness, being left behind, gender equality. And I thought, this is the best public rally I've ever been to. Yeah. If you're all thinking this and writing poetry like this is politics in a different format. Poets Against Racism would be perfect for people to come together, to unite under one banner, but also raise money for refugees, raise money for Care for Calais campaign for winter clothing. It was born out of the crisis of people wanting to express their fears of the rise of racism.
So 3 years on, how do you think it's gone?
Sadly, there's more of a need for Poets Against Racism. It's the only organisation I wish it didn't exist, because that would be brilliant, But unfortunately, 3 years on, now people have been saying Poets Against Racism were seeing things a little bit 3 years ago that now have really become a bit frightening around Europe, around having Trump. In a good way, it's got people together. We've had 300 individual artists and poets perform for us from London in Walthamstow. We had 100 people in Leicester in the Wolverhampton Literature Festival. So what's really good is festivals and poetry societies are all going, we've got a festival, can we have Poets Against Racism here? We've got an event coming. So it's really good. I mean, there's a number of people who've almost like get your Blue Peter badge. I've performed for Poets Against Racism. And those poets go off and do their own thing and then say, well, I'm in Leamington Spa today and there's someone interested in Poets Against Racism. So the Facebook page sort of generates quite a lot of interest. And there's a lot of political activists coming into the fold. For me, the most critical thing is there is a way of using art to talk about politics in a different format, and it sort of builds a different type of bridge between Labour Party members, CND, Peace Movement members, people not political. It's just a different way of bringing political discussion and dialogue without having a formal structure, and this works quite well.
Brilliant. You mentioned that 3 years on that there seems to be a need for it more than ever, and people are seeing things which they weren't seeing before. Can you tell us a bit more about the specifics of that, what people are seeing?
I think people are starting to people are listening to conversations in rooms when they thought, I'd never thought you'd say that. And that people keeps on coming up. And then what's happening in meetings and in workplace and in colleges, people are starting to come out with things, battles that we thought we'd won. Sexism, racism, homophobia, attacks on the LGBT community. And people are going, I thought we were a bit more civilised in this. So there's a rise of that. But what's also good is there's groups of people doing something and using their poetry and art form to go and say, well, let's challenge it. The hateful words that are out there, the discrimination. There's a job to do. People are quite serious to doing it. And it's, there's a lot of the poetry organisations. I'm part of the Poetry Festival in Nottingham, and they've looked at Poets Against Racism and said, well, we'd like you to be part of the festival. You've got 80 people at your gig this year at the Poetry Festival, which was brilliant. So they can see how poetry is really important. It's a platform, it's a vehicle, but also talking about issues that are concerning people is also just as important. So it's a good combination.
Excellent. So that's the history of Poets Against Racism. Going back a bit personally, what's your own history with poetry?
I did my first poem about 3 years ago, really.
Oh, okay.
So I've been performing poetry and writing poetry for about 3 years. I think poetry has been forming in my head for about 40 years.
Okay.
So I've been an activist for about 40 years, involved in all sorts of organisations. So really, it was literally one day I woke up and things started to rhyme, and I started thinking, this is a bit weird. And being an atheist, I thought, this is very weird. So it must be just definitely a chemical action in my brain.
Yeah.
And then I suddenly realised actually it's quite enjoyable writing things down. And then I did my first poem on a demonstration to London, and the coach driver said, well, we'll tell people where the toilets are and we'll let you know when we get back. And I said, aren't we going to have a song or a poem or get us all going? And they said, oh no, I don't think we're poetry. I don't think we don't want too much trouble today. So I did my first poem, Empire Calling, which was about the British Empire. And I realised I was going through a bit of an identity, re-establishing my identity as who I am, as an Indian-born English person. And what does that mean? So the poetry was, some of the poems come almost fully formed, and starting to enjoy it and getting up and performing, getting a reaction from people and getting people talking. It's been really enjoyable so far.
What do you think poetry's power is in helping forge solidarity and organisation among the working class?
Poetry for me historically has always been part of rebellion and history. I mean, if you look at Percy Shelley's Mask of Anarchy, it's a fantastic poem. It's a really long poem, and one of the things about classical poetry is I struggle with the language. As a child, was put off by it. But Percy Shelley, that poem describes the massacre in Peterloo 200 years ago this year, 16th of August, 1819. And the poems doesn't have to be flowery language. It's very brutal. Folded arms and steady eyes. It let them come amongst us and slaughter. It's weird. He's arguing non-violence in the face of the Salford garrison slaughtering 15 people in Petersfield in Peterloo and 700 put in hospital. Gandhi actually used Shelley as the principal point of non-violence as a strategy in India. So rebellion, poetry, politics have always been part of it. Massive tradition of Indian poets in partition in India in 1948, using poetry to argue against the rise of nationalism, were executed for it. Poets have been almost like the weather sock of warning people that something's changing in society, and poets have always stuck their neck out to use poetry to go, something's wrong with society, something's coming, and we need to do something about it. And music and song, and that's a massive tradition of the culture of the left. And if you look at all the famous songs and bands, Billy Bragg in Britain to Red Wedge in the 80s, we have always had much better culture than the far right. Much more colourful, and we've got that's really important. So
freedom in words, isn't it?
Absolutely, So words and to be able to express that's really important. And social events are really important. I don't bring people together. That's the other element. People came out 9 o'clock on a Friday night and went, I'm out after 9 o'clock, not watching TV. I'm talking to someone and having a drink. This is great. I mean, I did a performance with Love Music 8 Racing in Matlock, 240 people at the event, and there was Left Hand Drive, lots of bands, Derbyshire bands with a big following, and they were all really happy to be out dancing, and actually music and poetry and dance is really important for people. Sometimes you get over your Victorian embarrassment and go, I can't really dance, but it doesn't really matter after 3-4 pints. You're just, just glad to be out. But yes, it's very important historically.
I mean, you've told us a bit already, but tell us a bit about your background, your history, family history perhaps as well, because you're clearly extremely passionate about fighting hatred and racism wherever it raises its ugly head. And we see that in everything put on social media. I had a strange background. The starting point for me was the Anti-Nazi League in the late 70s and 79. I was 15, and there was two things happened. I was listening. One, I remember watching Linton Kwesi Johnson, the Old Grey Whistle Test, and as a kid looking at this poet doing politics about being black in Britain. I thought this is incredible. I shouted at my brother, there's a poet on TV, you've got to listen to him. And then a man turned up in a car, middle class, teacher, wound his window down. He said, do you want to join the Anti-Nazi League? And I said, yes. And then he took us to a meeting. There was an Indian workers group. My dad and father comes from Indian workers, trade unions,
Transport and General Workers Union, the Indian Workers Association in the 70s were really big in bringing politics into the trade unions. So it naturally flowed that the left and really the fear of the rise of the National Front at the time was quite worrying. In Leicester, they had 140,000 votes. Wow. They had trade union, they had stewards, National Front stewards inside the trade unions. There's some frightening things starting to happen. It looked like, it was getting very frightening. I remember personally being numerous times being chased down the street by skinheads in parks, and our uncles having to tell us where not to go and what to go. I mean, I still can't wear Doc Martens, because it used to be the Doc Marten and the braces and the skinhead was just that embedded that there was something nasty about to happen. Trying to reclaim Doc Martens now, fashion wise, but it's quite difficult. Yeah. But it was that was really it. The start was to someone else, and I was really interested. Someone said, "What can middle class white people bring to the movement?" If it wasn't for that middle class white man getting me to join the Anti-Nazi League, I wouldn't be here. It was critical that everybody has a role to play in fighting racism, and a critical role. So that was the start for me. The late 80s, I was always part of in the Sikh temples, and my family is Sikh, we always collected money for workers. So we had bucket collections for miners, and the Indian Workers Association did bucket collections for miners. And then then later on the poll tax dispute, I was involved in a number of left organisations, trade unions. I've always been a union member in Unison. So really all my politics has been about action and being on the street and being active. So, but a big part of that historically is constant fight against the far right, really.
You'll probably be more aware than I am, having lived to an extent through it. What was the racial climate like in the 1970s and 80s in terms of tolerance or hostility? Or
I think there was it was quite brutal. I would think there was quite brutal language. There wasn't any sophistication about the language. National Front were clearly the British jobs to British workers was the National Front slogan. The attacks on black and Bangladeshi communities in Tower Hamlets in the 70s were quite regular. There were racist murders. There were a number of things were taking place in terms of the Red Saris is I think so. It's a poem that Benjamin Zephaniah does about a white van that mounted the pavement and killed 3 women. And the Red Saris was an organisation of Asian women that protected Benjamin Zephaniah at concerts. Wow. And they used to call the Red Saris because they used to be trained in martial arts. These are Indian women who would so anything that happened, the Red Saris would come out and go, Benjamin Zephaniah would go, I'm off stage now, but the Red Saris are going to sort out any trouble. So it was like, not only, we weren't victims, there was something we could do, we were going, right, let's get organised. And in London, the South, all youth clubs making placards against the National Front. So there was brutal language, brutal politics, but there was also resistance. And that's where all the carnivals started happening. Rock Against Racism happened, and that drew that drew music and the Clash. And I had the honour of doing a gig with Poets Against Racism in Walthamstow with Roger Huddle. And Roger Huddle sort of started Rock Against Racism, booked the Clash. Sex Pistols weren't that interested, but the Clash, yes, straight away. And Steel Pulse and the Clash to be on the same platform with different types of reggae and white working class following the fans wasn't easy, but it was brilliant. So there was brutality, there was resistance, there was also the start of people starting to mix together and going, our culture's much more positive than the far right. We can get through this. It looks pretty bad, but that we can look at all these people in this park. There's thousands of us, and that was really important. And it was that thing that, and again, big figures were saying things that were critical. Eric Clapton was supporting the National Front. Yeah. I mean, you look at the frightening things now that people start saying, John Cleese the other day talked about London not being an English city anymore from his Caribbean island. And it's weird that actually you can try to dress it up as a cultural statement rather than a racist statement. But you say that, and then some child, a young person in a bus shelter gets a kicking.
Yeah.
You're not the person at the receiving end.
Yeah.
So those things are really important that people start to go, that's rubbish. You need to challenge it. So when Clapton, did that, he was mobilising rock fans to go, actually, this is our country. Yeah. So rock against racism needed to happen. Morrissey, unfortunately, to wear a far right pin on your lapel. And the weird thing is, all your heroes, all your childhood heroes, either they're locked up for other reasons, or your musical heroes start coming out with stuff, and you start going, I like the Smiths. I like the ambiguity of her lyrics. You were fantastic in the 80s. Why are you now shifting to this sort of... And I think, again, we were sort of talking about earlier about lost Englishness. And I think there's something about people being lost. That's the danger, that you start rallying people to think, I'm lost for a reason because someone else has taken something from me. And that's different, when you go, you're lost because, something happened to you that was the government. It wasn't. It wasn't the immigrant population.
It's that ownership thing, isn't it? It's that ownership thing. That thing where take back control. The old thing about flags and things and our land. I don't own any land. I don't want to own any land. It's just the place where I had the good fortune to be born. I don't own any. Right when I die, it'll go. It's just still exactly the same land. It's the way people talk about things, and it makes it kind of fall at the feet of the racist. It's wrong. It's just wrong.
I think Billy Bragg, in The Progressive Patriot, in the introduction, he says how I feel about my country. He said, it's perfectly acceptable to love your country, but I love my country like I love my kids. I want them to do well. I want them to be respected by the neighbours. I want them to make friends. But if I think they're out of order, I tell them off. And it's not my country above all else. And I think that's a brilliant way of looking at that.
And I think if it opens up a discussion about what is Britain, what is England. I mean, if you look at the Chartist movement, where the leaders of Chartists, one of the main leaders of Chartists were black. If you look at the history of the working class movement in Britain, I mean, I think the first Sikh to be executed, hung in East London, was in 1740. If you look at the whole history of immigration and Indian Workers Association and the trade unions in the 80s and 70s. English and British history is littered with migrant leaders being part of the fabric of the trade union, being part of the resistance.
It is indeed, yeah.
So a lot of when people say this is England, you say absolutely, and let's go back to. I mean, somebody gave me a leaflet from UKIP and said, I don't want boat people coming here, and I said to him, we all arrived here by boat. This is an island, and I said, what's your name? He says, is that Anderson? I said, Anderson, you're Dutch. And he said, my ancestors Dutch. I said, what do you hate yourself? He goes, no, I don't. I don't hate myself. It was weird to go. Well, how far back should we go? Let's unpick Britain and the empire. How far do you want to go back in terms of the continents and where we originate from? So I welcome people's discussion about this is what I'm proud of being English, and I think that leads on to who are we? Who are we now? Where are we going? And I always say, if you've been part of the past, you have the right to be part of the future. So everybody needs to come along. And if you dig backwards, people have always stuck together in resisting racism or bigotry. Actually, it's made them different. It's made them more human, than less human. And so I'm really hopeful, because I've always lived in northern working class communities. In Stoke, I lived in the late 80s in Stoke-on-Trent, and I was part of the anti-poll tax group. When I went into a pub, which is a pigeon fanciers pub, we used to go there for Sunday lunch. I used to go with a miner. I used to go in there with a Scottish miner called Stuart, and he was Glaswegian. And the people in the pub never could understand a word he said, so they called him a foreigner. So he used to say to me, what do you want to have a drink? That's how I go, what's the foreigner want? That's from Glasgow. So it was a weird sort of comedy moment, but then they kept on saying, they used to call me the Sheikh, and I said, I'm not a Sheikh, my name's Manjit. Oh, okay, Sheikh, well, what are all these, what's the poll tax about? I can't understand what's going on. What happens if I don't pay? And week after week, they went, okay, you seem to know what you can read for a start, you seem to know what you're doing. What if we all don't pay? What happens? And so we had this big discussion, and we all ended up in court, and I became a Mackenzie friend for the pub. And looking back on it, watching this pub, that when I first met him, had some real suspicions. then saying Manjit, pronouncing my name properly, is our Mackenzie friend. And the judge just looked at us as a mob of working class people, you're all out, get out of court. And we all didn't pay. And for that moment, we were all involved in a struggle, and we were all, together. And there's always been instances where people have helped out. And I think that's the hope for me. Some people say people are selfish and human nature is selfish. How do you explain a soup kitchen? How do you explain a food bank? Not the people receiving, but the people who left it behind. People who left the food I'm interested in. How do you explain it? Live Aid, children in need. How do you explain charity? You can't if you think selfish, our nature is to be selfish. It's always the leaders who look the most selfish.
Parents don't teach young children that being selfish is best, do they? It's a natural instinct to teach your kids to share.
Yeah.
And it's smashed out of us growing up as capitalists in a capitalist society, you know what I mean?
And Karl Marx talked about, when he talked about the alienation of the worker, it's because he was being alienated from his natural status, the individual atomized labourer. And I think under neoliberalism particularly, where the traditional bonds are being severed, we don't all work in the same place in the same community anymore. People feel more and more isolated. You're getting people spending more time online. Hatred is building up and division and polarization because this is not humanity's natural state to be isolated, working as selling their labour and not having those strong big communities.
And his fantastic poetry in Marx's writing. I mean, his description of religion, the heart in the heartless world, it reads like a poem. The heart in the heartless world, the spirit in the spiritless condition, the sigh of the oppressed creature. Yeah. He was also describing the attraction of religion, but also the fact that it's not a solution simultaneously. But he also described that we're deformed by capitalism. That's a brilliant way of describing that we're not natural. At work deforms us. That sort of having to go in and clock in, and that horrible sickly feeling on a Sunday night when you go, I say I'm going to go work next week, and on Monday. So and again, that for me, I'm really attracted by some of those poetry inside literature and writings. But the hope is really, I've always met people who have gone, let's do something about it. What's happening? Let's do something about it. And I love that. I think Tony Benn, when he retired from Parliament, said, I'm retiring from Parliament to pursue politics, which is great. He saw that actually this is one form of politics, but actually being on the street and linking with people and being part of the struggle is politics in action. And that really attracts me to not being too pessimistic if a vote seems like it's gone the wrong way. You can always go, well, the vote's anonymous. I know who my mates are at work. I know who's in my union. I know who's in my college or in my street. So I physically know what they think. So we thought that's always a bit of hope to go, let's not be worried about too much about, just votes. Do something as well.
Yeah, I agree. I think democracy is at its very best when it's participatory and not just passive with turning up to an election day bowling booth and just putting your X in the box, but actually taking part in developing that community and even changing your tiny little bit of the world for the better.
Yeah. What inspires my wanting to use poetry and activism is that it seems so logical. And I've been doing some work with Nottingham-based University around rhyme and rebellion, and a workshop for poets who just wanted to come and write about poetry with a bit of edge to it. And it just seemed brilliant chance to talk about where poetry has played a role in rebellion, but also how Nottingham's history of rebellion is incredible. The Luddites, the history of the towns that have been part of the English Civil War, part of the rebellion movement. Sometimes Nottingham Castle has got a rebellion museum, and it's great, but it's actually almost like fossilising rebellion. Like that was now, then.
Yeah.
People aren't rebels now, and there's a danger that rebels are seen as history rather than rebels now. So it's like combining the fact that there was a reason why people rebelled, why the Luddites smashed up the machinery, and why that happened. There's a reason why Nottingham Castle was burnt down. So it's like remembering our history is our history of struggle, just as important as going, well, that was the reason why people had food riots and why there are food kitchens now. You know, nothing's really shifted in some parts of the population.
Yeah.
So the riots might have gone, but the food banks are still here. That shows that there's not a lot, for some people, not a lot of shift taking place. So I'm fascinated by that, getting the opportunity to bring rebellion, British history and rebellion and the struggle through poetry as well.
You're talking my language now, Manjit.
Yeah,
yeah.
I think it's also good to young people for Nottingham Trent University to go. This came through a project called Changing Worlds, and it was about activism in literature and why. About 3 years ago, the Black Lives Matter, Me Too campaign, people started to write about partition, people started to write about their identity, and all that started happening, and the activism in literature started to go, wait a minute, something's going on. There's a shift again. So it was timely to sort of link in, all right, you know, it's not a blip, activism. It's always been part of our history, always been part of the history of struggle and movement. And in a way, it's quite it brings an audience.
Yeah. I mean, we have a section on the podcast called Working Class History, where I bring moments in working class history to the podcast and we talk about it, just to remind people, whether they're on the left or just or never been political before, that everything we have, nothing was given to us.
Yeah.
It was ordinary people coming together and saying enough's enough.
Yeah.
We want change, and that can still happen. It still is happening.
And I like it when people stumble over phrases. People go, "Oh, he's a bit bullshit." I love it.
Yeah.
What do you mean? Bullshit? No, just bullshit. I don't know what is bullshit? Oh, it means Bolshevik. Why? And then you go, well, you go back and go, well, that's a great term to use. What does that term mean? Who were the Bolsheviks? And what was Russia? And what happened? So it's all when people think, well, you know, all this rebel stuff on the left, they're always on about rebellion and revolution and all that, you know, having to have a banner and marching. Well, those days are gone. And if you look now, you go, you're absolutely right. Any opportunity to bring it to life is good. And for me, Poets Against Racism, being in the poetry world, is like a sort of people going, that's really interesting. Why did you write that poem? What's that poem about? But for me, sometimes comedy is really important in my poetry. Otherwise, I tend to not take it seriously. So I've written a poem called Children's Poem, called Bertie the Bee is worried about the collapse of neoliberalism, and it's almost like a children's walk through the garden of the far right and people building walls and shrubs. But it's a bit like going, actually, we should be able to use all forms of poetry, but it's not accident. My comedy history of living in Britain and having sort of faulty towers and the Carry On films and all that comedy is seeped into my head. And it comes out in slapstick form, politically. So, but it's even I find it like, oh, that's great because it now becomes accessible. People have a laugh and a giggle and go, "What is neoliberalism?"
Yeah.
Now he's talking your language, Dave.
Exactly. See, I tend to think that we were saying earlier about meetings being boring.
Yeah.
Spice them up a bit. Make it a little bit educational but fun.
Yeah.
Laugh, silliness. It gets the message. If there's a message, underlying message with a big old meaning, I think you'll get further. This is why we are doing this.
Yes.
And I think it fits in. For me, what's really funny recently has been that all my left friends, all the trade union activists, my colleagues have been, at first, were really bemused by me becoming a poet. They're going, well, we've always seen you as an activist. Because you've been in every organisation, now you're not in any organisation, you're a poet. I don't quite get it. What's the poetry about? And then now they're starting to look at themselves and going, oh, right, actually, you had 80 people at your gig at the Poetry Festival. We only attract 3 or 4 people to our meetings.
Yeah.
How do we get your people into our meetings? That's well, how do you? Well, they come along to the gig and meet other people, and they go, there's an exchange of views about how do we make meetings interesting, how do we get the message across, what else do we need to do, any form, any platform, any way of using music and poetry to get messages across. I think it spices up
That's it, spicing it up.
Yeah.
And making it attractive.
And I think it's really important. I mean, yesterday I was on the anti-Trump demo in London, and for me, I have my placard, which is Opposed Against Racism placard. It's laminated, so with waterproof conditions, as it rained yesterday, and it's been on 17 demonstrations. The placard is just Opposed Against Racism, and the number of people who come up and tap me and say, "I'm a poet. This is where I live. This is what how do I set up?" And it's great just to meet cluster of people coming up and poets. And on the embankment yesterday, waiting for the bus, there was a group of German students from Frankfurt School of History, and they just loved the placard, took it out of my hand, stood it in front of the eye and said, "You must take a picture of us." And their teacher went, "This is great, poetry against racism, this is what we've been waiting for."
Brilliant.
And these kids were great, all their fists in the air, and it was nice to share that moment and to go, well, yes, poetry and history, and it all ties in. So for me, it's a bridge, really. I think people sometimes struggle and go, "I'm in this organisation, and this is what we do. I'm in this organisation," and get suspicious of each other.
Yeah.
And for me, it's like going, well, we're all on the same May Day march. We just all had different banners. Actually, you're all here, and we've known each other for 25 years, all of us.
I've said this before. So we're all very, very slightly different shades of red.
Yeah.
I've said it a few times.
Yeah.
All right. And the thing is, songs sound better when we all sing together.
Yeah.
When you're singing on your own, you sound a little bit silly sometimes, especially if you've got my voice. But so if we all sing together, the same tune, obviously, we'll be better off.
I was thinking about, would you like to do some poetry? Well, whenever you want.
I'll
do a poem. Yeah. There's 3 poems, but I'll read one poem, which is My Flag, which it might seem relevant for today, and it was written actually in response of seeing Tommy Robinson and the far right using flags and the Football Lads Alliance, and that whole movement of just being the imagery of using flags as a sort of a block to people getting in.
Yeah.
So I wrote this poem called My Flag. My flag has no edge or borders. It doesn't make me stand up salute. It doesn't give me orders. My flag is the colour of a bloodstain. Some lost in battle, some still in vain. My flag is not a football slogan or a reason to learn to hate. My flag's the difference in humanity, something to celebrate. My flag is for my children, and for your children too. My flag is for the many, not for the privileged few. My flag is not owned by kings or queens or by the nation state. My flag says break these mental chains. My flag says liberate. My flag has no eagle, raging bull, yellow star, or rising sun. My flag is an open heart. There's room for everyone. My flag is not on the side of a bank or on a dollar bill. My flag has never declared war. My flag doesn't know how to kill. My flag is not made of gold or diamonds, nor does it smell of oil. My flag waves in the streets below, in the hands of struggle and toil. My flag is not the history of rulers past, but the history we've yet to write. My flag is not here to add to the darkness. My flag is here to bring you the light. My flag is my mother's tongue, although not here to sue. My flag is not here to keep you out. My flag is here to set you free.
Whoa!
Fantastic.
Hairs were literally standing up on the back of my neck listening to that.
Yeah,
It's absolutely brilliant.
Mine
Absolutely
too.
Brilliant.
So it seems to fit in to a sort of a feeling really of what flags represent, but then what that idea, if there wasn't a flag of a nation but there was a flag of your history, of your movement, what wouldn't it be? It wouldn't be all the hijacked reasons why people use flags. And it is that thing about we go through transition, and I think a lot of people, I like people to go away and we talk about it and go, and to inspire people to be able to go, let's think about nationalism without going, nationalism, imperialism, and people go, oh, I don't know what you're on about. You know what you're talking about, but actually people don't get put off by it. And then My Flag as a poem sort of really helps just to be able to go, what does that mean? Why am I attracted to a flag? And very much what we were talking about before in history. My father on TV once in the 70s used to say, look, there's Union Jack. That's why the Irish people don't like it. their land has been taken as they took India. And he used to do these sort of speeches, and there was a bizarre affinity with the Irish struggle, because they were saying, well, and he had Irish friends, and he remembered the 50s and the signs, no dogs, no Irish, no black. That was a real experience. Actually, I used to wonder why my uncles drank Bacardi white rum and Bell's whiskey, and because they weren't allowed into pubs, a lot of the pubs and the clubs, but actually a lot of the Jamaican community and the workers they worked with used to go, well, we got this white rum. And Bacardi now in Indian weddings is part of the staple diet. And I thought, where has this come from? And what's interesting, it's come through a combination of being pushed together by being excluded. That's interesting.
See, I like that. That's draws you together. Come on.
Me too.
Thank you very much, Manjit.
You're welcome. Thank you for asking me to come. I think it's really, it's good to meet people, to be able to talk about politics, to be able to just talk about art, thank you. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much.
Thanks to our guest Manjit Sahota. You can find out more about Poets Against Racism at www.poetsagainstracism.com, or find them on Facebook at Poets Against Racism. Today's music was Emily by Desensitized. You can find out more about the band at www.desensitized.co.uk, or follow them on Facebook. They have a new album out called Sister Psychosis, and they're really good, so go catch them if you can. Thank you for listening to A Few of the Many. You can send comments, hate mail, or milkshake recipes to afewofthemany@gmail.com. Thanks for listening.